Hello,
Hey,
my name is Carol McCoy. Today is March 16th, 2021. We are in the offices of the Nashville Bar Association on the 13th floor on 4th Avenue North. This interview is being conducted for the Legal History Project of the Nashville Bar Association, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Chancellor Russell Perkins, my former colleague. Would you please state your full name
my name is Russell Perkins.
and your date and place of birth?
September 23rd, 1956. I was born here in Nashville.
And would you tell me a little bit about your family, your grandparents, your parents, and your siblings?
Okay. My mom and dad were both Nashville natives. My dad served in Korea and worked janitorial jobs, two full-time janitorial jobs, one at West End United Methodist Church and the other at the Harding Place apartments, which are now the Harding Place condominiums. And then after that, in about 1966, he got a job at Ford Glass Plant. And that changed our lives because that's when we were able to move out of the housing projects, move into a nice quiet neighborhood, not too far from Pearl High and head school. So started off at Moses McKissick School. And then halfway through the 5th grade, we moved and I went to head school. But it was at Moses McKissick where I joined the library club.
Oh.
They had, the principal was Dr. Avanetta Davis, and her granddaughter is, I think, general counsel for Meharry. But in any event, she knew every child's name in the school. And she had this practice, and if you saw her years later downtown, she knew your name. It was incredible. She lived to be 100.
Oh my gosh.
She was such an amazing woman. And her husband at the time was president of Tennessee State University, Dr. Walter Davis. So back then, she instituted this thing where every child had to be in a club. And we got release time on Friday afternoons to go to our club. And I was in the library club. And that really made a difference in my life.
What grade was this?
This was 3rd grade. And I still have friends from the library club.
Well, let me back you up just a little bit.
Sure.
You told me about your dad, and you told me that when he got the job at Ford Motor Glass, that you moved.
Right.
Where had you all been living prior to
We
that?
were living in the Preston Taylor housing projects. The address we had then was on Indiana Avenue. Before that, we lived on 40th Avenue across the street from St. Luke AME Church, and that church is still there.
So tell me about your mother.
She worked in various jobs. There was I think the name of the department store was Rosenblum's on Charlotte, 16th and Charlotte. And then she moved next door to Haddock's Pharmacy. Then she went back to school and became a nursing technician, and she worked quite a few years at Baptist Hospital, which was walking distance from our house. Then she moved. The last job she had was at Equitable Life Assurance over in Metro Center.
Okay. And your grandparents, were they in town when you were growing up?
Not my grandfathers. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather.
What was his name?
His name's Robert Perkins Sr.,
Okay.
who is from Centerville, Tennessee, but he was living in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And my maternal grandfather, Mr. William Huggins, lived in Chicago. My grandmothers were here, but my dad's mother, Miss Jimmy Taylor, died when I was 3 or 4 years old.
You didn't really know her?
I didn't know her, but my mom's mom lived longer, and she's the one who had an impact. That's the only grandparent we had in our lives.
That's the one you knew best?
Oh, yeah.
And she lived with you or not?
No. She did what they called domestic work back then,
Okay.
and she lived on Clifton Avenue.
And your parents, did they have brothers and sisters?
My mother was an only child.
Okay.
My dad had 2 sets of siblings,
Oh.
one from his father and one from his mother. And so on his mother's side, there was a family of 6 siblings, and on his father's side, who were raised in Pittsburgh, was a family of 5 siblings, counting my dad. And he's the oldest of both sets.
And did you know one set of those siblings better than the other?
Yeah, the Nashville, the one on my dad's mother's side. They became Mortons, and so anybody named Taylor or Morton in North Nashville, I probably know them.
Okay. Oh. Well, let's talk about your brothers and sisters too.
Yeah. Well, I'm the third of 4. The oldest is my sister Chris. She's 6 years older.
When was she born?
She was born in 1950.
Okay. And what does she do?
She is retired, but she worked for the state for many years in disability determination and had some kind of federal component to it. But she was a regional something. She had been promoted up. She has 2 master's degrees. And very smart.
And then who was next in line?
My brother, Robert. He's semi-retired. He's working part-time now at the Maine Public Library.
What does he do there?
He puts books up.
He's been there for quite a while?
3 or 4 years. He worked for the state for a while. He also worked at various warehouses, etc.
Okay, and then you're the third,
Yes.
and then who's the baby?
Karen, my youngest. So she passed away some years ago.
I did not know that. I'm so sorry.
And so, but she was something else. My mother used to say that she was free-hearted. That meant that anything she had.
Oh, she gave everything away.
Yeah. We loved to play cards with her because she would hold her hand down.
Well, that's kind of giving you an unfair advantage.
Yeah, I know.
Were your parents ever involved in any community activities, active in their church or
No.
politics?
Nope.
Just worked hard.
They'd go to church. They sent us to Sunday school. They did work hard, but no community. My daddy was an avid and excellent, outstanding amateur golfer. And in fact, when he was in the military, he won a tournament over in Japan. And, he knew the people like Ted Rhodes, for whom the golf course is named after, and others, and had contact with
Do you
us.
play golf?
No.
Anybody in your family?
No, my brother and I got introduced to baseball. We went one time to see my dad golf, and it was amazing. It was mind-blowing how our dad, who we saw as dad, could get out there and hit that golf ball so far. And it just seemed like it just kept going and going, and it was quite a thing.
It's amazing.
But we had gotten the baseball in our blood, and we never
We'll
got
get
around
to that in a minute, the baseball, because that is, but I want to be sure that I have the places and dates of birth of your parents and
Yes.
your sisters. And what-
Both parents born in Nashville. My dad was born, you want the exact date?
Yes, please.
October 22nd, 1931.
Okay.
My mom was born December 12th, 1932.
Are they both still with you?
No,
Both passed?
both gone on.
I'm sorry to hear that. So when you were little and living on Indiana Avenue,
Yeah,
were you in school at that time?
yes.
And you said you went to where for elementary school?
Well, it's known as McKissick Middle School, but we always, for some reason, took pride in calling it Moses McKissick because, he was an architect and one of the forerunners of McKissick and McKissick. And so we took pride. And so when we run into somebody who went to McKissick, we always say Moses McKissick. It's a point of pride.
And then did you change schools to go to junior high?
Halfway through the 5th grade is when we moved.
Okay.
And that's where I stayed until I graduated from college, got married, etc.
And your parents moved where when?
They moved on Clifton Avenue.
Okay.
Between 20th and 21st.
I know where that is.
Not far from Head School and Spruce Street Baptist Church.
And who, as you look back, would you say were some of your childhood friends?
Well, they're still my friends.
That's good.
One of my best friends from the library club was James Chip Harper, and we texted each other this morning. One of my other best friends from 2nd grade, Thomas Drumright, and his son is the pastor of Temple Church, Darryl Drummer. And he and I are still the best of buddies. And one of my other best friends is a retired police officer, Arthur Danner. And then, of course, my brother and I were very close, still very close. He was the best man in my wedding and that kind of thing.
What does Chip do?
Chip is retired from UPS.
Okay. And
everybody's retired but me.
well, you're too young to retire.
I know, I agree.
Do not follow my example. But we touched briefly, you wanted to, and I didn't let you, on recreation. How did you get interested in sports?
Well, my dad was also a baseball fan and had, legend has it, family legend has it, and I think it's true, back in the 50s, down at the Sulphurdale ballpark, had caught a ground rule double hit by Hank Aaron.
Your dad?
He did not get the ball signed, and we ended up playing with the ball and losing it in the sewer. I have precious amnesia about what happened to us when he got home. But he was a big San Francisco Giants fan.
Why so?
I think because of Willie Mays. And I became a San Francisco Giants fan when I was little. Learned how to do the basket catch that Willie Mays was famous for. And I started playing baseball. My dad, somehow, through sacrifice, bought us both brand new Spalding Maury Wheels autographed, it's
Yes.
machine autographed,
Yeah,
baseball gloves.
Really good.
And I slept with that thing. I put it under my mattress. Our coach said, "You're supposed to eat, sleep, and drink baseball." And so I took him literally, even though technically I wasn't on the team because I got cut as a 9-year-old, and my brother was 11-year-old, made the team. And I understood being cut from the team mean you didn't make the roster, you weren't on the team, you didn't get a uniform. But nobody said I couldn't come to practice.
Oh, now did
I
you
kept coming to practice.
Let me ask you this. Did you get cut because you were too young?
No. They had 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds.
Oh.
And one 9-year-old made the team. And then it was like 7 of us 9-year-olds that got cut. And we had to walk home by ourselves. And they were all crying. And I guess because I knew that I was going to try to figure out a way to tag behind my brother, I mean, I was sad, but, I knew I couldn't hit the side of a barn. So it was a fair decision. There was no appeal. But the coach was right to cut me. So,
But you'd been playing ball with your brother before then.
Yeah.
And with your dad?
Yeah.
So you could throw and catch.
I was one of the best defenders on the team, but I couldn't hit the side of a barn.
So how'd you learn?
Well, I don't know if you heard the story. I've told it so many times.
I haven't heard it.
Okay, so I go back. They said, "What are you doing here?" I'm coming here to practice, And I begged to come, my parents, and they let me go. I was tagging behind my brother, and they let me practice and things. And I went to all the games, and they had their. And I would start off in the stands and get as close to the dugout as I could. Then the umpire would make me go back. But and we go to the Red Barn because our games were at Percy Warner Park, and the Red Barn was either on Highway 100 or on Charlotte. I don't remember which. And I'd be first in line for a hamburger, even though I wasn't on the team. Just had that enthusiasm. So.
But you rode the bus with your brother.
Yes. Well, it wasn't a bus. It was like a station wagon.
Oh, okay.
We were like 15 kids in it. Back before.
They had buses.
Back before people were concerned about safety and seat belts and things like that.
Okay. So that would have been 1950.
That would be, 1965.
65, okay.
No, 66, since
When
my
you would be
birthday's in
9.
September.
Okay.
And so at the end of the season, I said, "Coach, can I have one of those broken bats?" So all the bats were broken. I mean, wooden.
Right.
He gave me one. I would take it home, ask my mother, because we couldn't just go into a cabinet and get tape out and use all of it for something for us when it's for the family. So I asked her, would you tape this bad up for me? And she taped it up. I remember clearly she used adhesive tape. The kind
the
that
white.
Sticky. The first 80. She used that. And I took that bat and I swung it an hour a day. Practice, because I had just a terrible uppercut. And I practiced left-handed and right-handed with the bat. And just on leveling my swing. Just on being quick with the bat. And the next year, I made the team, made the starting lineup, and was captain of the team. So
At 10 years
from
old?
10, 11, 12, I was captain of the team. Not because I was the best player, not because of anything other than, I don't know. It remains a mystery to me to this day.
But you probably made a lot of good friends.
So it was wonderful. I think they made me captain because I was the smallest one of the team. And so at the beginning of the game, we would do a victory lap before the game.
Oh, and the little one went out and ran.
Yeah, the captain, would go first. So I think that's really it. And I was by far the smallest one.
Who was
out
your
there.
coach?
His name's Clarence Goldthreet, and he was a teenager. And he went on to coach at least one or two state champion softball teams in Missouri.
Okay.
And he's still there. I don't know if he's retired yet. But so he was only about, I was 6 or 7 years older than I was.
So he might have been 16, 17?
Yes, he was still in high school.
Wow.
It was great.
So, I know that you had this love of baseball.
Yes.
Did you and your family take any interesting trips? Did you have any hobbies outside of baseball?
No, we never took a trip, but our baseball team took trips. We were the Kappa Kittens, and so we were sponsored by the TSU Tigers, so we were the Kittens.
Okay.
And so when I was 9, the year I didn't make it to the team, we went to Atlanta. We got to see Hank Aaron hit a home run and all that. It was
When you were 9?
Yes. And we had a big team at that time we called the Kappa Cats, the 13, 15, and Howard Gentry was on that team. And I have a picture somewhere. Howard Gentry and I together. And then the next year, when I was 10, the first time I was actually on the team, we went to St. Louis, and we got to see I think it was Bob Gibson, but I'm sure it was Orlando Cepeda, and it was the year that they were so good, one year that they were really good in that. So, and I might have the years missed, but I know it's the year that Orlando Cepeda was either the MVP or the MVP runner-up.
Well, I just need to test your memory a little bit.
Go ahead.
But who was on deck in 1951 when Bobby Thomson hit a home run? The Giants had 2 outs, and there were 2 on base. It was the Dodgers versus the Giants, and they were tied 1-1 for the playoffs, so whoever won. Do you know who was on deck?
The only player I know that was there in 51 is Willie Mays.
And that's who was on deck. And that's my husband's question
He was a
for
rookie
you.
that year.
Yes, and he was so afraid that he was going to be the one to strike out, that Thompson would get walked. So he was really petrified. Anyway, that's my one quiz question for the day. So, as you were going through grade school, we've got you at 10 years of age now, and then you did it for 11, 12, 13. And you're going to school where during junior high?
Junior high, I went to Washington Junior High.
Okay.
Which was, when they built Pearl Cone High School, it was part of the land that they needed, and it was torn down.
And do you have any memories of any teachers that made any significant impact on you, either for grade school? You did talk about the teacher in the reading. Middle school or high school?
In about 2011, I wrote a church newsletter for our church that bragged on all of my teachers from first grade all the way through 12th that I could remember. And so first and second grade was Ms. Hazel Thomas. She was well known in political circles and also a member of 15th Avenue Baptist Church. And I remember I was very moved one time when my great-grandmother passed away in about 1967, that she was there at the service and was so kind to my parents. And then, so I wrote to all of them.
Oh.
I sent them copies of that newsletter. And I got responses back from grandchildren. Miss Thomas was still living. I sent one to Mrs. Davis, and I ended up getting reacquainted with her and making remarks when she was recognized by the Lynx, and it just turned out beautiful. And you know Stacy Garrett,
yes,
the
I
Bone
do.
Firm. Well, her mother was my sixth grade teacher and was pregnant with Stacy.
Wow.
When, and that was 1968, and Miss Garrett, I will never forget her. Not only was she a great teacher, she was so kind, and she gently pushed us to excellence. And when Martin Luther King died, and on the last day of school, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. And she was so wonderful. And Miss Thomas did the same thing for us when President Kennedy was killed. And it was an afternoon on a weekday, and she was just so sweet to us, and told us we didn't have to do any more work, and allowed us to lay our heads on our desk and all that. As a second grader, it was traumatic for us.
That was 63?
It was 1963.
And so where were you when Martin Luther King was killed?
I was at head school. I was a sixth grader.
And how'd you all get the news?
And back then, elementary went through 6.
How did you all get the news?
She told us that morning. Last day of school was a big thing back then. We would have like a little party, some music. The boys who were not shy like me could dance with girls. And there's no way you could have gotten me to dance with a girl at that age. I was 11, and then a month later, we won the city championship, the Kappa Kittens, Kappa Alpha Psi, after an undefeated season. And one of the first, I can't say it's the first, one of the first African-American teams to win the whole junior knot hole thing. And there's a trophy in the Kappa house that I've looked at commemorating that we won the city championship in an undefeated season. And our pictures were in the paper.
What a great day. Great day. So when Robert Kennedy died, you weren't in school, because that was during the summer.
It was the last day of school. We were having our festivities and party, and Miss Garrett was our teacher, and she told us about it. And
that was
so
Robert Kennedy.
Yes, Robert
What
Kennedy.
about Martin Luther King?
Martin Luther King, we were in school that day. It was a Thursday, I believe.
I think you're right.
And so the next day, he was shot over in the evening. So
Right.
the next day, the Friday,
Did they suspend school the next day?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so. There may have been something, and of course there was a lot of social unrest about that.
There
And
was.
I can't remember which incident, but I do remember looking on the news and being frightened that there were tanks on Jefferson Street.
Wow.
And I think it was 1968. And it was
Do you remember how your parents reacted to it and what they did?
they were quiet people. Well, when I applied to be a judge, one of my friends said, he's a quiet man from a quiet family. They didn't do, my mom was just like, always trying to praise me, always trying to encourage me, always saying you could do it, and that kind of thing. So she was gentle with me, and my siblings through things like that happened.
What were the courses that you liked the best in high school?
In high school, believe it or not, I was on a science track and actually won the Science Chair Award when I was a senior in high school as supposedly the best Biology 2 student in the city. And I wrote a paper, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you do any science competitions?
Now, I wasn't good. I was good with the reading of books.
Okay.
I was not good at, and so when I got to Tennessee State, I was taking zoology and stuff like that my first year, and I found out when they tried to have me dissect a dead pig that this was not for me.
It's not for me.
It's not for me.
So
Not
now
at all.
you told me a little bit about the librarian or reading in third grade. How did your interest in reading continue?
Well, one of the, they say membership has its privileges. So one of the perks of being a library, in the school library, is they help you get a public library card. And so that meant I had access to the Bookmobile and the Hadley Park Library. So the Bookmobile came every 2 weeks into the housing projects. And I was at the door like a runner getting ready to start a race. So, because it was a 4-book limit, so I would have those 4 books read in 2 nights, and then I'd run to the Bookmobile, take my books back, get me my 4 more books, and that was a love affair with the Bookmobile. They knew me. They may not have known my name, but they knew that I was the little one of that family that loved books. And
What books do you remember that you really liked?
I used to read back then a lot of biographies and stuff like Kit Carson.
Did you read one about Lou Gehrig?
I'm sure I did. I read all the
And Babe
sports,
Ruth?
all the sports, all the things about the sports, and all the explorers and stuff like that.
And how did your interest in reading continue through junior high and high school as far as, you got to the point where you were saying you're reading biographies? How did it continue?
Well, it's very moving to think about that here we were in the housing projects, and when I was 9, I was in the Jim Gillum, the former Dodger player, youth club, and the title was For Underprivileged Kids. Well, I knew what that meant, but I never felt underprivileged because, I just had so much love and encouragement in my life, and we ate, and, I didn't understand it. So when I was about the 3rd or 4th grade and on my Bookmobile sojourn, I read a book, read these explorers, read about Marco Polo and all that, and I began to say, well, there's a world bigger than these, what we call brick or block walls of the housing project. And I began to think about things outside of that. And I kept getting books. I kept my library card up and enjoyed reading. And so I advanced to more, the bigger books. I remember reading a little bit older, maybe 5th grade, reading the Alfred Hitchcock mysteries and other books, reading Sherlock Holmes books and stuff like that, reading about history. But something wonderful happened one day. We had a teacher at Moses McKissick Elementary School who was a 5th and 6th grade teacher. I never had her, but my older sister did, who also was a World Book Encyclopedia representative. And one day we just had the World Book Encyclopedia, and my parents had bought it on what they described to us as buying them on time. Of course, I didn't know what that meant. But all of a sudden, we not only had books, but somehow my dad had gotten a second-hand bookcase, and it was full of the World Book Encyclopedia. And we had, before that, This is stirred up memories. We had a paperback set of encyclopedia with most of the covers off, torn
Right.
off, had over for use, been torn off. And so when we did reports in school, my friends who were live in the same neighborhood, same situation, somehow they had World Book encyclopedias, and I had to use these little paperback, which filled one shelf all of
Right.
them. And then when we got the World Book, it was like, I don't know, it was like 10 Christmases for me in one. It was like, what? I got a library now. I'm in a library club. It was just, I can't even explain how incredibly happy I was.
That's a great gift.
To get those encyclopedias.
And how long did it take you to get through them?
Well, I don't know. Just, little by little. And of course, the older kids who supposedly had the most complex work, they might have 3 or 4 of them out at a time. And I was like, where's the C at? And, but it was fun. We got along. But it was, I don't know if I've ever, other than getting a baseball glove, I don't know if I've ever, and the gift wasn't for me, it was everybody.
For the family.
But it felt like it was for me. And so it was one of the most exciting moments of my life. Other than playing baseball, getting a baseball glove, running to the bookmobile, I think that may be up the top one right there, getting the World Book encyclopedias.
All right, so then you had that when you went to junior high, right?
Yes.
So in junior high, you said you were kind of science oriented.
Yes.
What kind of led you, other than zoology, to look at something else?
Well,
We skipped over high school there. Is there
Yeah.
anything about high school that I should bring up? Never got in trouble, never sent to the principal's office.
no. It would have been worse at home if I had.
So what's the most memorable event, other than winning
Right.
baseball game? What was the most memorable event for you in high school?
That's a good one. I would say.
Now, you were a
And-
small ninth grader, right?
Yes.
And were you a regular-sized 10th grader?
Small and
Small all the way?
all the way through. I had a little growth spurt somewhere in there, but I was very small and very thin.
So-
Baseball player.
So what was the most memorable experience in high school?
Probably getting to know Coach James Armstrong, who was the head baseball coach and the head football coach in the 11th and 12th grade, and legendary Cornelius Ridley, the basketball coach, was our assistant baseball coach, and he was hilarious. Coach Armstrong was the tough guy, and Coach Ridley was just laid back. But I made a mistake in the 11th grade saying, I'm going to go out for basketball. And Coach Ridley ran us so. I said, you know what? I'll stick to one sport. I went. So he was tough in the sport that was his passion. But in baseball, he was laid
How
back.
tall were you at that time?
5'5".
And I know baseball takes a lot of running. How were you as a basketball player?
I was a ball handler, good shooter, a defensive specialist. You could shoot over me, but you couldn't get around. Quickness is that's it.
Quick.
Just was a good athlete. Sometimes you see somebody who's a good athlete playing a sport, but that's not their sport.
Right, just a lot of natural
Yeah.
coordination.
Yeah, that wasn't my sport.
So
And I didn't have the love for it that I did for baseball.
what led you to TSU?
Well, I got academic scholarships to 3 or 4 places. I got an academic scholarship to UT. Got 2 academic scholarships to UT. And
So your grades were really good.
my grades were good. It's like 3.7, something like that. And and I was a National Merit Scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to give my brother, my brother and sisters a shout out. My older sister Chris was National Merit. My brother won a national essay contest while he was at Pearl, and I think it was Congressman Dick Fulton that had the fact that he won a national essay entered into the congressional record. I've been trying to find it. Maybe somebody can help me find it. But at one time I saw it back when it happened. But in high school, getting to know those coaches, the professors, the teachers were all good. We had Mr. Carnes, Mr. Leslie Carnes was our principal. He was just incredibly generous and nice man, And so,
Did they help you go to TSU? I mean, you had these
Yeah, I
scholarships.
was telling my TSU story. Well, I wanted to play baseball. I had been fortunate. Back then, it was 10th, 11th, and 12th for high school. And I've been fortunate to be the starting second baseman, and we had good teams all 3 years. And so my choices on baseball were down to Belmont and Tennessee State. And I had the academic scholarships. And so UT wrote, it was a $500, 2 $500 scholarships to UT, and they said, well, you got to give up one of them because we got to serve more students. Well, I needed the whole $1,000 to go there, so and I didn't mind the fact that maybe I was going to have to work my way through college. I'd always worked, cut grass, or worked after school at Harvey's Bakery downtown as a high school student. So so the coaches, it was the assistant coach at Tennessee State, Coach Baker, and there was the head coach, Coach Whitten at Belmont. Now, Belmont was a national power in the NAIA back then. So I'm thinking, maybe I should go to Belmont. In TSU, they had a middle-of-the-road program where they usually won half, and I said, well, maybe I can go to Belmont. And so, but I didn't. It's not like it is now that where before your senior year. It was after our season. I was playing summer league ball, right before I go to Tennessee State. And so, long story short, Coach Whitten only offered me a half scholarship, half tuition scholarship based on my ACT score. And TSU offered me a full academic tuition scholarship for baseball. And so I went, and Howard Gentry Sr., for whom the Gentry Center is named, I met him. He had to interview me before I got to school. And that was a great moment. And
That must have been a
he
great
signed off on whatever the paperwork was.
So you were talking about how you were working during high school. When did you get your first job?
The first job the first actual job was when I was 14, and I guess they let 14-year-olds work. At the IHOP over there by Vanderbilt,
Uh-huh.
I was a busboy. And two of my buddies already worked there, and so they got me out. And I worked there maybe a summer, or maybe part of the academic year after school. And then the next job I got, my dad knew the manager of the baker at Harvey's. I don't know how, maybe he had worked. it was something about Motlow State, and I never did get it straight, but my dad knew the manager, Mr. Sprague, Mr. Bruce Sprague, and he hired me on the spot. So in the 11th to 12th grade, they would let me work during the fall.
What did you do?
I was a pot washer. And
Okay.
so I took this great big old and put it in a big machine, and then I swept the floors, I mopped and everything, and that's what I did. And so that was after school. I'd catch the bus
Was
right there
it
by.
Harvey's downtown?
Yes, I catch the bus
And
right.
he was the baker?
He was the manager.
Oh, manager.
The head baker turned out to be somebody related to my wife, but I didn't know it at the time. And so later, when they were at a family gathering, there he was, and he was able to say something nice about me. So I could have gotten in trouble with that.
So you were working before you went to TSU.
Yes.
Did you keep any of those jobs while you were in college?
Yes.
What did you do?
Like, there used to be a pizza place out on White Bridge Road called it was at 27 White Bridge Road, called House of Pizza.
Yes.
I used to work there as a pizza chef. So I picked that up, I guess the summer after my senior year, and I kept that during the fall of my freshman year at TSU. And then during the baseball season, the owner of the restaurant allowed me to work on Sundays in the afternoons. And so I didn't have any baseball going on, unless we were on a road trip. But we didn't go very far on road trips.
So you start TSU. Were you living at home or did you live on campus?
I lived at home.
Best way to do it. But you're working, you're playing ball, and you're going to classes.
Yes.
And what do you recall about the teachers that you met in college, and how did you handle your studies and your sports interest at the same time?
I was a political science major by that time. I wasn't sure what I was going to major in. I explored the science, found out that. So Dr. Charles Sampson was the head of the political science department, and later Dr. Akeju, I can't remember his first name, became the head of the political science department, and they were both extraordinarily brilliant men. They challenged you. It wasn't like, okay, you're in this class, you're going to get an A because you're a good student. They challenged you. They made you talk about things. And I remember Dr. Sampson challenging me, I think in the second half of freshman year. And he asked everybody, and this is 1974, 1975 academic year. There was an oil embargo. There was all kind of things going on, and oil prices were going up. And he asked the class, what's the most important thing that we need in the United States? And I said, and people were saying things, and I just said resources. I said, we have to have resources to do anything. And he pushed me, and then I thought he was mad at me or something, but after he said, that was a good answer. So I had that. But the most memorable thing that happened to me in undergrad is just I kind of on a lark took an Introduction to the American Legal System class from Julian Blackshear. He was the toughest professor. He yelled. One time, I didn't make a habit of being late for class. One time I was late for class, and my future wife was walking me down. So this was senior year. Was walking me to the class. And we heard him yelling. She said, who's that yelling? I said, that's my professor. And he wasn't yelling at anybody. He was just so passionate about the law. And it did something for me. And I started, I had made some law applications on the advice of people.
Right.
But I didn't have the passion for it. I was thinking, well, it's getting to be senior year. I need to do something. I'm not going to be a doctor. So I wasn't anywhere close to the best student in that class. we had some brilliant people in that class who knew they wanted to be lawyers. One of them was Kenitha Sawyers, who is married to Carlton Lewis, the juvenile court referee. She and I were good friends.
And she's a lawyer.
Yeah, and we ended up at Ohio State together, law school. But there was some students who were getting A's on their papers and stuff, and I was used to getting A's and B's, but I wasn't getting A's and B's in it. I was getting some C's and getting some B minuses on the interim papers. And so early on, I said, I got to turn this around. I can't go home to mom and say, I forgot to mention, after the first year of baseball, I declined the scholarship offer, got a job at UPS, and worked my way through Tennessee State University.
And why did you do that?
Well, one, I knew I wasn't going to go minor league or anything like that. And two, to be charitable, the coach was kind of...
Not what you thought he should be.
almost like a crazy person.
Oh.
Not one of the coaches that you would think, but somebody who was there for a short period of time. And I just...
Decided to go a different way.
I decided, he was a little odd. I wanted to work. And two, because I wasn't going to go pro or anything like that, I couldn't see myself playing baseball year round. We had to have fall conditioning and fall games. I just decided it wasn't worth it.
When did you meet your to-be wife?
She was 13. I was 15. She was out across from her home, out in the Bartow area, playing baseball in the field, softball in the field. And my friend knew her because he lived there, and I was out visiting him. And I asked him what was her name. And then when she was walking across the street going home, when it got about dusk, I said, Renita. She didn't know me from Adam. I said, what's your phone number? And she said, 2440979. And I didn't call her for a while, but I had it up here. And when I called her, we became friends. And 6 years later, we got married.
That's a wonderful story. So you were probably 21 when you got married?
Yes, she was 19.
Both in college?
I had just graduated.
Oh, you had just graduated.
I graduated May 6th. We got married June 3rd. We were talking about the other day, said it was ridiculous for us to get married. And we were just like kids playing house when we went to Columbus, Ohio, for me to start law school. I had the scholarship to Ohio State, and she had said she was going to go, but I wanted to be sure.
Did she go to TSU?
She went to TSU, but she had just finished her freshman year.
So you lived at home during your college years. She lived at home during the college years. You were dating at that time.
Yeah. If you call it dating, her parents were very strict.
Oh, so maybe you weren't dating.
So I would bring her home at like 8:30 or,
So you go to the movies or something.
Yeah. Something quick.
Okay. So I didn't want to rush through college, though,
Right.
before you get to
Right.
where you're going to go. So you have Julian Blackshear screaming at you. You're starting to begin to find that the legal course was of interest to you. And how did that inspire you to get from a B-C to...
We had an assignment, maybe the third assignment, which was like shortly before fall midterm. And it was to draft a partnership contract. And I did. And then sure enough, got to C on it. And I wasn't used to getting C's. And I went through the paper. And he had, marked up, I had done creative writing. I would convince professors to let me do creative writing instead of term papers. So that's what my problem was. And so he was pointing out things and all that. And then at the end he said, you show a lot of promise. And I said, you know what? That was the moment. That was the moment where I said, I'm going to law school. And years later, we saw each other practicing and all that. After he retired, I saw him at Old Charlie's, and I had already told his daughter at a Napier Luby, that I was president of the Julian Black Sugar fan club, because of the passion he had for what he was doing and how he was taking time from a busy practice to give something back. And I sat there and I told him the whole story and what it meant and what he had written on my paper, and it was a great moment. And so when you get the chance to say thank you, and sometimes you don't get the chance or you don't take the opportunity, but to get to say thank you to someone who has opened a door for you is a wonderful thing. And he appreciated it. He was always very gracious toward me. And if I were to run into him today, he would be all smiles. And
But still a big voice,
yes.
if you did. So you are getting ready to finish college, and how did you pick a law school?
I applied to Ohio State because there was a flyer on a board or something about applying to Ohio State Law School. And again, I had been getting some encouragement to apply to law school. Of course, I knew nobody who was a lawyer other than Julian Blackshear. And so I applied. And
Just to one?
I just applied to one.
And the flyer is what did it for you?
Yeah, flyer. I just applied. I didn't know what I was going to do. By that time I was a supervisor at UPS. I was engaged. I was a part-time supervisor. I knew that I had talked to them. I could go to full-time. When I got married, I was thinking about the Nashville School of Law, but I wasn't sure. And so it's over in the semester, much later than people do things now, over in that fall semester, when 5 of us, including Kenitha Sawyers and 3 other students, and of the 5, I had the 4th lowest GPA. It was a good GPA, but like I said, we had some brilliant students in that class. And so I got to go up there to visit. One of the conditions of the visit was that you had to apply for it, and I had already applied. So I got accepted before anybody else. I think 4 out of the 5 of us got accepted. 2 went to Howard.
Now, what year was this that you entered law school?
I entered law school in 1978. So
Okay.
This was in the fall of 1977. And so
But
Yeah.
Howard wasn't on your radar? Okay.
I went because the flyer, the encouragement by the department chair, who was Dr. Akeju at that time, and say, go up there, see what you feel like, because I was committed to staying here with my wife, to be. I didn't even know if she would go to Ohio with me. So, fortunately, I got admitted quickly, just incredibly quickly. And it's not because of, that my credentials were the highest in the group, but somehow, I don't know what it was. It just in my life, I would go somewhere, and in my shy way, with no charisma or anything like that, no gift of gab, somehow
I think you're selling yourself short there.
I don't know, that people would feel sorry for me. I don't know. But in any event, somebody would see something in me that was good and give me a chance, make me captain of the team when I was 10. Stuff like that happened to me all my life. And so I met Dean Jack Henderson at Ohio State.
Is he the one that interviewed you?
Yes. They gave us all the opportunity. It was called Graduate and Professor School Visitation Days.
Okay.
And so we got to visit, and we all had the option of an interview because we had to apply to go on the trip. And I said, I'm interviewing. And none of the others did. But I went and interviewed with
Dean Henderson.
Dean Henderson. Big, super nice, red-headed guy, husky, like maybe he was a former athlete. And I had one of the best conversations ever. And I was coming out of my shell a little bit. And he just was a wonderful guy. And I could stop by his office in the course
Did you talk sports with him?
No, we never
No,
talked
just
sports.
talk school?
Just talk school and family. He was always interested in asking me about my wife, Renita. And so it was just an unusual thing. It just sometimes people are just gracious and nice.
Well, what experiences did you have at law school? How many students were there? And for me, I'd like to know how many women and blacks you had. What was the mix of the classes?
It was about a 250 person first year class.
Big
when
class.
we went. It's a big school. We had to ride buses around campus. I'd never known that. I used to walk from home to campus sometimes. So it was a whole different world. Such a huge campus, and then we went to the.
Live in married students' quarters,
They had a married student.
dorm.
No, it's a big apartment complex called Buckeye Village. But we didn't go there right away. We got us a place on Chittenden Street, 5 buildings from the law school.
Okay.
So I could walk. But after my wife got pregnant, we ended up in Buckeye Village. And so it was supposedly the largest African American class at that time, 17 incoming out of the 250. I don't know what the math is. It was less than 10%. And so we had an orientation for BALSA, the Black American Law Student Association, and they had a former dean come talk to us who was now just a criminal law professional. And I don't necessarily have to mention his name, but he came and talked to us, and we were eager. It was maybe a week before classes started.
The orientation for new students?
Yes, and he said, and it's all black students, he said, I am a racist. That was the first thing that came out of his mouth. And of course, then he went on to explain that he grew up in a small town in Ohio. He was 18 before he ever even saw a black person. And I guess he explained it in some kind of way. And anytime you have a group of students like that, you're going to have somebody like me who's like, quiet and shy and retiring, and thinking about where I can get a book. And then there's going to be some other people who are going to go to the real dean, and 2 or 3 of them went to the dean, and we ended up getting an apology about it. And it seems like something was in the little newsletter, the little law school.
Why do you think it started off that way? Why would he do that?
I think he was coming from where he was. One of the dynamics of life is that we can't see ourselves, and sometimes we think meaning well is enough, but sometimes we have to go through a process of self-examination in order to find out where we are. And so just assuming that meaning well, not having a real hostility to black people didn't mean that there was something that you harbored that you should not harbor. So, it's complicated like that. And that's why unless I'm talking to somebody I'm really close to, I try not to talk a lot about race, because it's
a difficult
complicated.
topic.
It's complicated. You don't want to be calling people racist because they may seem insensitive in an area. And so you don't want to write people off, and that kind of thing. You want to try to communicate and try to find some common things to talk about. and try to understand where somebody's coming from. So he said that I heard what he said. I heard what he was trying to say. I wanted to sit down and talk with him, but I didn't have the courage. I didn't have the forwardness in my personality, the social skills, as my wife said, to do that. And I didn't know the setup. I didn't know.
No, you're just an incoming student.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do. But we got the apology. He didn't teach any first year classes. So I ended up deliberately taking this criminal law class when I had an opportunity, because I wanted to get to know him. And I suspected, just like when you and I were blessed to go to all these bar association memorial things.
Right.
And we find out so much more about people that we have seen for 20, 30, 40
And
years.
never knew.
And it's in a short period of time. The resolution, maybe 5 minutes or 4 minutes, and then we find out all kinds of things we did not know. And I thought, I don't want to be thinking about this man a certain way without ever having a conversation with him.
So when you took the class, were you able to talk to him?
I did talk to him.
And what did you find out?
And you find out that he felt like it was a terrible mistake for him to say what he said. And
And how was he as a professor of criminal law?
he was brilliant in his area. And there was no concern on my part. But supposedly it was a anonymous grading thing. I don't know how anonymous it really was, but I wasn't worried about that, because I felt like, this is an academic subject. He doesn't, does he even have time to be
Right.
hostile toward me about anything? He doesn't know me from Adam. So I took the class and ended up with a good grade. But it helped me. I was pushing myself out of my little shell because I had terrible stage fright and didn't do well in I got past one round in the moot court, but I won the best brief award. And so it said, and that was just like mind-boggling to do that, because my friend from Mississippi, we're buddies to this day, came and said, "Russell, is your middle name Taylor?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You won the best brief award. It's on the bulletin board down there." And I just said, "Don't play with me," And I went, and it was such a shock, because I had such a kind of a mediocre performance in the oral argument. I was having trouble saying my name, such stage fright.
I'm with you on that one.
So it was such an incredible law school moment, and my friends were, when something good happens to you, and then you get friends who are genuinely, seem like almost more happy than you are. It's such a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It's a warm feeling.
When something like that happens that's something you couldn't predict or anything like that, and it happens out of the blue, and people who you're friends with seem like they're happier than you are. And so that was a moment in law school.
Now, did you have to work while you were in law school?
I did. Back then, I don't know what the requirements are. As part of accreditation, the first year law students could not work at all.
Okay.
And then second and third could work 15 or 20 hours. So after my first year, in the summer, and so we got married in June, found out my wife was pregnant in October, November, had our first child the following July. So, and because I couldn't work, she had to work. And we're newlyweds, so.
So what did Renita do?
She worked for Ohio State. She worked as a secretary in the physical plant.
Okay.
Whatever. And so I said, we're newlyweds. She knows me. She knows I work. So I got 2 jobs that summer. I worked full-time at the Ohio State Legal Services, and they had a special project, a grant that I was hired in, called the Food Action and Community Education Project, called it FACE. And all I did was read federal regulations related to nutrition and write draft comments for my boss. Also, in the course of that, I got to represent. Now, I couldn't talk. Literally, I couldn't talk. I'm not trying to be humble. I couldn't really put 2 or 3 sentences together in a group. I excelled in law school in the small group things, the counseling, the practice, little things we did in small groups,
Right.
mock settlement negotiations and all that. I excelled in that. I excelled in the seminars. But when it came to making a presentation in front of people, I just was bad. I really was bad. But anyway, so so in the course of it, I was able to push myself through these things and go forward. But the law school,
What was the other job that you had?
I worked part-time as a research assistant to my real property professor. I did that in the evening. I read every landlord-tenant. Well, I thought I did. My job was to read every landlord-tenant case in Ohio and to outline the development of the implied warranty of habitability under Ohio law. And then he gave me another assignment. He was working on a paper about the Barackman. This professor was Frank Uppen. He's now I think he's emeritus at NYU. He spoke and wrote Japanese. He's a property professor, brilliant guy. I don't know why he took a liking to me, but I think I'm so
I
grateful
don't think
for that.
anybody that gave you that assignment could possibly like you.
Well, it was exciting. I'm getting to the exciting part. So, the Barackmen were people in Japan who were culturally and otherwise indistinct from other Japanese people, but they were like the untouchables because they would do an ancestry check and find out that they handled dead animals in the past. And they would get divorces, they would lose their job. They had ghettos for these Barackmen. And so
They
that
were
was
the outcast in their society.
right. And so I was studying the Constitution of India and the Constitution of Japan. And in the backdrop of the Barackmen in Japan and the caste system and the untouchables in India. It was fascinating. My work didn't help him. My work was infantile to what he was at the level he was, but we had great conversations about it. And
Did you stay in touch with him?
yes, as a matter of fact, in about 1996, my other friend, the one from Mississippi who told me about the award, was up working at NYU. And so I went to visit him. My wife and I went to visit, and he invited us over to dinner. And it was Japanese style, sitting on the floor. It was amazing. And he remembered me, which was stunning. Which was stunning. And through him, he had a neighbor named Jerry Holton. Jerry Holton was a partner in a law firm called Moots, Holton, Weinberger & Co. A 6-person boutique, really brilliant people. I mean, Jerry Holton was I think he's still around, a Yale law graduate, Moots, Harvard law graduate, former Notre Dame law professor, and they got me in there to work on some security cases. I thought I was going to be a security lawyer, and I worked on security with a young lawyer named Jim Kaufman, who later became part of the SEC. Something high up in enforcement. But they were brilliant lawyers, and I got to do a lot of different variety of things, discovery things, security things, representing plaintiffs and defendants. And Jerry Holton became the undersecretary of the Navy under the Bill Clinton, so I guess they went to law school together. Can you believe that? And they were just happy people, nice people, generous people, and it was Phil Moots, who in my senior year, it's about March, I didn't have a job yet. I had interviewed here in Nashville. We were wanting to come back home. He said, "Don't you have a job yet?" No. And they're a 6-person firm. They weren't hiring. They didn't hire every year. They
Small.
4 or 5 years they would handle. And he picked up the phone, called the Ohio AG's office. "Hey, Hank," that was like the second in command person. "I got a great student over here. He's worked for us. He does good work. I know you're through interviewing. Can you interview him?" Well, that's how I got the job. I worked there for a year. And then in April of that following year, which was 1982, I graduated in 81. In 82, and by God's grace, I passed the Ohio bar exam on the first try. And so I came down in April for a wedding. My brother-in-law was Renita's brother was getting married, and I interviewed with Senator Avon Williams. And it was something, because I went there, I walked by the building on 203 2nd Avenue. I thought the building was condemned. It had law offices stenciled in yellow on the glass door. I just said, it can't be a law firm. And so I ended up finally somehow getting in there and interviewing with Senator Williams first. No, wait a minute, let me get this right. I interviewed with Richard Dinkins first. And
Did you know him before then?
I didn't know either one of them from Adam. And my mother...
This was just when you came down for a wedding? You decided to interview?
No, well, I arranged the interview before I came.
Okay, so you knew you were coming for the wedding.
I actually, Jim Duran, who I met in an interview trying to get in that firm, started talking about how great a lawyer Senator Williams was. Now, I had any reason to know that. My mother was scared to death when she knew I was interviewing with Senator Williams. She thought I would get hurt. She had heard about, the bombing of Mr. Luby's house and all that. She didn't want me anywhere near that. I said, "Well, Mom, I hear he's a great lawyer." So I went, interviewed with Richard Dinkins. So first thing I noticed on here, 2 things I noticed about Richard Dinkins. His door was shut. It had like a 9x11 piece of regular typing paper that said on it, "Hesitate to disturb," on his door. And so, and so I go in, and he has a plaque on the wall. And, I didn't know it at the time, but his dad was a minister and former president of Lemoyne College, and he had a plaque on the wall that said, "Study to show thyself approved, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." So he had a scripture, 2 Timothy 2:15, on his wall. And that gave me a little piece, but it was a cordial interview.
How much older is he than you?
4 years.
Okay,
So he was a partner, and he just
and you're 1 year out of law school.
yeah, and I just had a good interview with him, and see, he was the screener. I didn't get to Mr. Williams unless he said it was okay, and evidently said it's okay. I went to Mr. Williams, and Mr. Williams said, "Well, it looks like everything's okay and everything," and I said, "Okay, well, you'll be hearing from," he said, "but first you got to go meet my wife, Mrs. Williams." I said, "I've never heard of that." And in the interviews, they both talked about things that I had never heard of in a legal interview, and I had several. And they talked about loyalty, and they talked about family, and it might be all right. And so sometime on that trip, so it must have been like on a Sunday afternoon before I headed back, because that was a Friday, the wedding was the next day. I can't imagine doing it on the same day of the wedding. So it must have been that Monday. and it was in April. I think I met them like on April 2nd or something like that. So, and I went over to meet her, and she was just like an older cousin my mother had, who was like an auntie, like rough, The only difference is she was highly intelligent and educated and brilliant. But, she had a little salty language and all that. And she just, okay, Perkins, she was just, she was very, straightforward.
Aggressive.
Yeah, she was straightforward and assertive. And I loved it because that's what I had been used to, in my family, with the women in my family. They loved you hard, and and Mr. Williams said something to the effect of me later. She said she never had taken to anybody like she'd taken to me. And of course, so I got to be with the firm, and I started in August. I didn't take the Tennessee.
So April you interview, and they offer you, and you come in August.
I came in August.
But before we go there, let me ask you this. You got married to Renita,
Mm-hmm.
and what was her maiden name?
Jackson.
Okay. And when did you all get married? What year?
June 3rd, 1978.
And you have one child when you come.
Huh?
You had one child when you came down from Ohio.
No.
So there was another little one that came along.
We had 2.5 children.
Oh, well, let's talk about a few children before we go on with Avon Williams. Tell me about...
Renita was pregnant with our third child when we moved.
So,
and she was born in January of 1983.
okay, now tell me the names of your children.
My son is Russell Jackson, named after my wife's family, Perkins.
And when was he born?
July 28th, 1979. And then
Okay.
we had another daughter born after I
Wait a minute. When were you all married?
We were married June 3rd, 1978.
Okay, you said 79. I was thinking, that's very close to have the baby born. Okay, that gives you a full year.
It's close. He was born
Okay.
13 months later.
Yes, okay. So who's the next little one?
Robin. She's born in November of 1981, after I graduated in 1981.
November?
I was licensed November 6th. She was born November 14th,
Okay.
1981. And then the next one was Renetta, born January 11th, 1983.
Okay.
And then a few years later, in September 1984, our youngest girl, Ria, R-I-Y-A, was born.
And what day was that? September
September 11th.
11th? You have two born on January 11th and September the 11th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you have 4 little ones.
Yes.
Now big ones.
Yeah,
Do you have any grandchildren?
10.
Okay. I won't ask you their birthdays, but can you tell me their names?
Yeah. The oldest is Taylor
Mm-hmm.
McKenzie. She's 14. Then there's Madison Abigail. We call her Abby. She's 12. Then there's Christian. She's 11. Then there's Grace, who's about 8. Then there's Alexandria. She's about 8. Then there's Kennedy. She's 5. There's Elijah. He's 5.
Are they twins?
No, they're cousins.
Okay.
Then they're 20 days apart. Then there's Russell Jackson Perkins, my son's son.
How old is he?
He is 3. And then there's Carl Aaron Carter, which is my youngest girl's third child. And he was born last August, so
He's 9 months.
yeah, something like that, more like 8 months. And then on March 10th, last week, Christopher, I don't even know his middle name, Perkins, was born. So we had 5 girls in a row, and then next 4 out of 5 were little boys. And
What a blessing.
it is a blessing.
Are they in town? Are they someplace else?
Everybody is close by. My son lives in
You're very-
Pleasantville, which is
You're very fortunate.
in Cheatham County.
Anybody become a lawyer in the family?
Nope. I thought my youngest was, but she's a school teacher like a mom.
Any potential lawyers?
Taylor, the oldest, is
Thinking.
she's really sure she's going to be a lawyer.
Well, that's good.
She's really smart and sweet. She's still sweet. She's 14. She hadn't gotten mean yet.
Well, I remember what you were saying about, speaking your piece in law school, and the difference between writing and oral. Those are two different talents.
Yes.
But let's go back to this meeting with Richard Dinkins and Senator Williams, and we're from April, and then they offer you a position, and you come with 2 children and 1 to be.
Yeah.
So what happens then?
Well, I started, and I don't know what exactly the requirements were, but for a short period of time, I was allowed to work under the supervision of an attorney, even though I was not admitted. I didn't take the bar until February, and was blessed to pass it on the first try. But there was a period of time when I wasn't licensed in Tennessee.
They didn't have reciprocity?
No, because I hadn't been practicing long enough. I had to be practicing 5 years at that time. So I ended up having to take both bar exams. And then, I just thought, during that first period, I mainly followed Richard Dinkins around and did research and writing. And then, once I got licensed, it seemed like almost the majority of my work was with Senator Williams. I was the second chair, briefcase carrier.
What type of cases was he handling at that time?
He had the big cases, the school desegregation cases and the voting rights cases. He had the big service merchandise case with the National Labor Relations Board that my colleague Ron McNutt eventually took over. He had the Geyer case, the higher education desegregation case. But the cases I worked on were police brutality, employment discrimination, car accident, workers' comp, and then a variety of things like probate, domestic relations. I did some criminal defense. Later, I decided to give up the criminal defense and domestic relations, but I learned how to do it a little bit. I never felt comfortable with each area. I never devoted enough time to either one of those to feel like I was at the top of my game on those, but I felt like I was competent on those. And most of those cases settled, but I tried a couple of criminal cases. And both cases were jury trial, and both resulted in hung juries.
Well, I would consider that success if you're the defense counsel. Did they retry them?
No.
Well, then, that's considered a win. Did you develop a specialty while you were with Senator Williams?
I probably did more when I left, well, let me answer it like that. When I left in 1994 to go to the Attorney General's office, I had like 120 cases. About a third of them were federal court cases. And 90% of those were employment discrimination cases. About a third were either accident cases, and there was a variety. Most of them were car wrecks, but there were some just like assault cases, that kind of thing. Workers' comp, that's all in that third. Then I had a variety of general practice, probate matters, that kind of thing. And I had a few outlier cases, like I had one housing case
Right.
over in East Tennessee where the advertisement was no pets, no blacks. And we tried that before the Tennessee Human Rights Commission. Of course, we won.
As you should have. But you still have to go through it.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of eye-opening when you're trying one of those cases to find out what people's attitudes are like.
It turned out that we had nice clients. And
That helps.
You know, and in a case like that, you want to have clients who are able to explain what they went through, how they felt, what it was like, and then come across as credible people who are telling the truth. They're not just trying to,
Right.
because in a case like that, okay, it said no blacks, no pets. So what? What were the damages? But because of their credibility, because they had always been hardworking people and well-respected, and that kind of thing, we were able to get a good result.
Let me ask you, when you represent somebody in a case like that and you hear what your client is telling you, you can kind of view it through the lens of yourself, even though you didn't go through it yourself, you didn't have that experience. How does that affect your view of the people on the other side of the table, the ones that put up those signs? What do you think about those people and how do you evaluate them?
Well, what you're trying to figure out is how can I present this case in a way that reaches whomever's going to decide the case. So if it's a jury case and we're going to have some pretrial summary judgment motions and all that, I'm trying to make sure that I present it in a way to the judge that they understand what we're dealing with, what the real potential harm is, and what the indignity is, and what the violation of the law is to them. And then when we get, if it's back then, not many employment cases went before a jury. Now it's more prevalent. There was an act passed in 1991, and then
Right.
the state act that allowed jury trials. So I was primarily before federal judges, and I would start trying to tell them in pretrial conferences and things, depending on what kind of case I had. I had one case where I was covering for Mr. Williams, and of course he began to get sick. He had ALS, and I began to do more and more from him, but his mind never was affected by it. So he had a case with two brothers who had discrimination claims against a fiberglass plant that was out here on Centennial Boulevard in Nashville. And so he asked me to cover the deposition, just gave him the file. Nothing had happened in the case other than
Filing the lawsuit.
some written discovery. But so I'd never met them. So I met them to prepare them and all that. And one of the brothers I didn't even get to meet. We didn't have time. They just handed me the file. Of course, that's the one I should have met with. We get in there, and the older brother could not read, and I didn't know it. So they knew it, so they kept handing him the EOC charge and things, and he was mumbling and trying to get by.
And I called back to the office. I said, can this man not read? And they said, well, he has trouble reading. He's a slow reader. And I said, well, how did he sign and swear to the complaint? He said, we read everything to him. And I asked a few more questions. So we went back. It was a miserable deposition. They scored points right now. And then the other guy, who was smart and could read and everything, was very quick, but he was overconfident. A couple of times he blurted out a few profanities and things like that. So we go to trial in front of perhaps my favorite judge of all time, Judge Thomas Higgins in federal court. Tough, smart, but he had a twinkle in his eye. He had something about him. He had humanity about him. And so we tried the case. And knowing what we knew about the case, we were thinking we were going to lose the one where the guy couldn't read. And we're going to win the guy who could articulate and explain. But I had a moment where I actually thought like a lawyer before we went in there. After I would spend so much time with my clients, I probably was working for minimum wage. But I just said, we got to get the best out of it, because in a discrimination case, the number one job of the other side is to attack the credibility of them. So if they're not credible, it doesn't matter if they had racial slurs or anything. If they're not credible, you're going to lose. So I kept meeting with the older brother, Curtis. Sweet man, quiet man, embarrassed because he couldn't read. And I talked to him. I said, this man's like talking to an engineer when you get to talk to him. He knew about the processes of the fiberglass and all that. I said, so I sent a notice under Route 34 to come out and inspect and photograph the manufacturing process. Because what had happened is they had promoted two other people ahead of them with less experience and stuff, people they had trained, and said that, he just couldn't get it and all like that. And we went out there and we hired somebody to do the video and went through the manufacturing process. And he was telling me, see, they're not doing it right. You see that? That's too thin. He was looking at the product as it came to. He do it right. So we get to trial, and he testifies. I worked with him. I spent so many hours. A more confident lawyer wouldn't have had to spend, but I just had to spend time with this man. And so he got in there, and he testified and all that. And the other brother got in there, and they, of course, brought out the profanity in his deposition. And, of course, Judge Higgins didn't like that. And I could see it on his face. So the opinion goes out. We lose the younger brother, the one with the profanity. We win with the other. And Judge Higgins made a finding saying that he had an encyclopedic knowledge of what it was, and that they're saying that he wasn't sophisticated enough to do it was a pretext. And we won.
Great
A guy
day.
that could not read. And what I was trying to say about the pretrial conference, after I figured out what was happening in the case, I said, Your Honor, now this case is going to be tried before you, and they're going to make all kind of claims about this and all that. I just want Your Honor to know that the most articulate witness is not always the most credible. And so every time we went, I would say something. I say it in a different way, trying not to be too pushy with the judge.
Right.
But my point was, I got a credible witness, but he's not the most sophisticated. And so.
But sometimes people who speak in simple terms not only speak the truth, but they speak clearly, forthrightly.
And, I lost cases in front of Judge Higgins. I never appealed it. He was right. It was, close call. He made the call that way. I was fine with it. I got a fair shot.
I told my people, don't spend any more money on this case. So he was a tremendous, brilliant man.
Well, when you talked about police brutality, did you have any of those cases?
Yes. One of the criminal cases I had a police brutality civil case, and it was a father and son in Jackson, Tennessee. The son was like a 20-year-old father in his 40s, and there was an incident where the son was burning rubber or something like that in front of the house. Police came. Next thing, the whole family's out in the yard, and the son is getting roughed up. The dad tried to intervene. He gets roughed up. They both get arrested for assault, simple assault, maybe resisting arrest. And we bring a police brutality claim in the federal court over there in Jackson. Ron McNutt and I. We were like the two amigos all over the state. And we're exactly the same age, 4 days apart. And he had clerked for Judge Wiseman and Judge Phillips on the Sixth Circuit. Brilliant guy. And so I let him write the briefs. That's what he loved. And we tried the criminal case first over there. 12-person jury, hung. The jury was hung. And the dad was acquitted. So he represented the dad because we felt that was the easier case. And I had a little bit more experience. So the dad was acquitted. He didn't do anything. The son was trying to mile fire off and trying to struggle a little bit and all that. And, it was a close case on him. And so I represented him. And it was 9-3 in favor of conviction. But we got the hung jury. We ended up in on the civil case, we applied for pretrial diversion. It was denied. We didn't appeal. We tried the case. It was a hung jury. After that, I applied again for pretrial diversion. They said, no, you already had a trial, so it's not pretrial. I said, no, we're going to appeal. We appealed to the Court of Criminal Appeals and won. And so we were ultimately able to get him, the son, pretrial diversion. We lost the police brutality case. It was on the news every night in Jackson. We had sued up, I don't know, 2 or 3 police officers, the department, but the judge, I think, can't remember which one it was. It might have been McCray, but he wasn't buying it, and that was a bench trial. We lost it.
That's painful when you lose. So when you are with Senator Williams and Richard Dinkins, how long did you stay there?
I was there just shy of 12 years.
The 2 cases that you've mentioned are pretty memorable. Are there others that stand out in your memory, maybe the desegregation cases?
I didn't work much on those. I helped out in the Kelly case, the secondary school case on the attorney's fees application, but it was behind the scene.
More on the employment discrimination side in federal court?
We had a case, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. It might not be worth our time, where we tried Mr. Williams and I tried an employment case up in Cookville before Judge Morton. And it was in the heat of summer. And we had sued the union and the employer. And our client's name was Miss Pearlie Mae Haney. And she lived somewhere like Smithville or somewhere like that. And bench trial, it was just a nightmarish experience. We had subpoenaed one man, Mr. Williams had subpoenaed one man to testify. He didn't show up. There was a bench warrant. Mr. Williams didn't want the bench warrant think the man was Mr. Watkins, didn't want a bench warrant and something happened, and the judge got upset with Mr. Williams and threatened to put him in jail. So here I am I'm just there to carry the briefcases and to help him and to slip him questions and things like that and find doctors. I was like a glorified paralegal.
How long had you been with the firm at that time?
I had been there maybe 4 years.
Okay.
And so for a moment there, it looked like I was going to have to try the case. But, everything cooled out and that kind of thing. So at the end of our proof, the court granted a directive verdict in favor of the union, which was the right thing to do. And the union, they packed up their stuff and left. And then we finished the trial as against the employee. And then we got a decision later ruling against us on every count. And the court, there was a Rule 11 application for fees against our client. And then the union filed an application for fees against Mr. Williams under the Judicial Code, 28 U.S.C. 1927, where a lawyer is alleged to have excessively and vexatiously multiplied the proceedings. And that's what the standard was. So Judge Morton, he's just calling it how he saw it. Wasn't no bias, we were just in that position. 17,000 against our client. And 5,500 against Mr. Williams, personally. So Mr. Williams getting sick. And we get that in. And again, back then, I was like, Ron McNutt used to say, you have procedural disease, Russell, because I was just always in the rules. And I knew when we got it, we had 10 days to file a Rule 59 motion in federal court. We have 30 days in state.
It's different.
But I knew, because I had been carrying those briefcases, that we had 10 days. And I knew that we could file an affidavit in support of it. But everything had to be in within 10 days. So I went up to Smithville, I got an affidavit, I got an indigency affidavit from her as to the 17,000 against her. I filed it and with the motion, and we opposed, and he denied the Rule 59 motion. Judge Morton did. We appealed to the Sixth Circuit. The Sixth Circuit reversed as to Miss Haney, saying that the indigency affidavit showed that all she had was like a broken down Mustang. She had no money, she had lost a job, whatever. And so they threw that out. They affirmed the award against Mr. Williams. Okay? So this is literally what happened. We're getting close to the 90th day to file a petition for writ of cert. I'm going to try to go through it real quick. And I said, and I had filed a petition for rehearing. The Sixth Circuit said, there's a conflict in the circuit. The language that Judge Morton had used about the excessively and vexation, it's more of a legal malpractice. I said, that can't be right. If it's legal malpractice, he's entitled to a jury trial and everything else. If it's a sanction, then it has to be more than negligence. And he talked in terms of, he didn't say negligence, but it was negligence language in it. And there was a split in the circuit. Some said that was enough. Some said no, it had to be vexatious. It had to be bad faith and all that.
Bad actor.
So, I'm not a member of the Supreme Court bar, but Richard Dinkins is. So that's Saturday. We worked every Saturday. Mr. Williams was not there by that time. He had not been coming in anymore.
What year was this?
86 or so.
Okay.
And Ron McNutt had worked for Judge Phillips on the Sixth Circuit. And I said, Ron, you got to help me. I finally decided to read the rule. I'm not admitted. We could FedEx it there and get it on the 90th day that month. This is on a Saturday. I came in and said, I'm angry about this. I'm going to file a writ of cert in the Haney case. And you had to have it printed. It wasn't possible. So I said, should I file a motion for extension of time? He said, no. File it unprinted and ask for leave to file a printed version. He knew that. I never would have thought of that. I never would have thought it. I never in a million. I did that. We filed it. And they sent us something that said that if it's granted, you'll get a chance to file,
Print it.
yeah, whatever, yeah, print it. So one Saturday afternoon, I'm at home, and Renita answers the phone, and she said, Mrs. Williams is on the phone. I was scared. I thought something was wrong. And she said, they granted cert in the Haney case. And so
That Saturday paid off.
we got a middle of the page full thing article in the ABA journal over that case. And so after we got the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in New York to agree to help underwrite the expense and to actually go and but my cert petition could not be changed. They said it's rough, because what I did is rework my petition for rehearing. It's rough, but it worked. But the brief, they would write it, print it up, and put it on. And the union called us and said it's going to cost us more than $5,500 to print. We withdraw our application, and then we looked at it. And we tried to figure out what to do. I said, they filed a notice of withdrawing the application for fees, and we filed a suggestion of mootness in the United States Supreme Court. They granted it and vacated the Sixth Circuit opinion because the underlying application was gone.
Because it was gone.
But they don't do that anymore. That is the greatest victory in a horrible defeat. That's my claim to fame.
Wow.
That 5,500 charged against Senator Williams
Took you to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I won a $5,500 case. That's my biggest victory in my career.
That's pretty impressive.
I did the tobacco settlement with the state attorney general's office.
Let's get to that in a minute. I want to
Okay.
find out, you were talking about Senator Williams having ALS, and you were there for about 12 years.
Yes.
What caused you to change positions from being with Richard Dinkins and Ron McNutt and maybe Senator Williams? What happened?
Well, Senator Williams was getting to the point where he could not participate. There was a period of time when he wasn't coming to the office, but he was editing our briefs. He and Richard, although Richard Dinkins was the managing partner, they were still making decisions about the management of the firm, that kind of thing. But my wife and I talked about it, and we wanted a more stable situation. There was a lot of fluctuation. I was a partner. It was rough. The main engine for the law firm, Mr. Williams, was not able to work anymore, and we decided to leave. And one day in January, when people used to look in the want ads, she saw one ads for a job with the state attorney general's office. She put it in front of me. I applied. I got it. I got the job, and after I got the job, I spent like a whole day Saturday talking to Richard Dinkins about it. Very interesting conversation. Brilliant guy. He's hard to convince, you know. He's just tough to convince, you know. And so, you know, it was back and forth. But he's, you know, because we had such a good working relationship, he understood where I was coming from. That's next day on the Sunday, I went to talk to Mr. Williams about it. And after talking with him, he said, go ahead and take it. Renita was with me, and she had a special place in the hearts of Mr. Williams and Mrs. Williams. And so it was a great blessing. So we took it, and we were blessed. I had a great experience in the Attorney General's office.
What was your first position with the Attorney General? What were you supposed to start doing when you got there?
I was in the class division, civil litigation and state services. They did two things. They defended employment cases.
So now you're on the other side.
I'm on the other side. Chris Modisher is my deputy, great person. She would come in every day, happy, saying top of the morning to everybody, and really put me at ease, because it was a transition. I was about 37.
Is that the first time you had a woman as more or less your...
No, because in Ohio, Colleen Nissel was my deputy when I was in the administrative agency section, and I tried administrative cases 3 or 4 times a week.
So you got your hands around administrative cases early on.
I don't know if the Court of Appeals would agree with that. Just a little trial judge.
But so Chris Modisher was your second supervisor, or I guess
Right.
chief, who was a woman.
Right.
And women had started getting into the bar.
Right.
And you were doing the class actions and the desegregation defense work.
Well, I mainly ended up doing university cases.
Okay.
And they would maybe start out as a tenure case, and then there would be a concern about, or claim about race, gender. Had one case, it was a religious discrimination claim. So we got those kinds of claims.
Were those cases originally tried in court, or did they become administrative hearings? At what level did you?
I ended up handling quite a few, got quite a few dismissed on motions, but the two I tried when I was in that division, because I transferred out, was a jury trial case in federal court in Memphis, and
Was that a tenure case?
it was a tenure-related case.
Okay.
And it was a tenure-related case involving Mississippi State that I tried over in Chancery Court in Knoxville, also a jury case. So both those, the only two cases that I tried while I was in that division. I was in that division for about 20 months. As a matter of fact, I had to take one of those cases with me. That was a condition of letting me transfer. So, but the one in Memphis was a 2-week trial. The one in Chancery Court in Knoxville was a 10-week trial.
I just have a question. At what point did you begin to feel comfortable talking on your feet? Remember you told me back on moot court you really weren't that good? So where did it happen that you began to get your voice?
It happened in a case I tried with Senator Williams before Chancellor High, in the court where you presided over. And it was a case, I think the lawyer's name was Mr. Lewis Farrell.
My partner.
He did, at that time, he was doing nonprofit work.
Yes.
And this was a nonprofit entity involved in it some kind of way. We tried it. It may have been a 6-person jury. Mr. Williams did most of the heavy lifting, but as the trial went on, it was about a 2-day trial. He let me do more and more. And we won. It wasn't a big case, but we won. And at the end of the case, Mr. Williams, who was in the height of his powers at that time, said something like, he's still wet behind the ears, to the chancellor. But 6 more months with me, he's going to be hard to beat, or something like that. And I took that as a high compliment. And, we had some cases where we just had everything stacked against us. We sued the airport once about the construction, and we represented 3 predominantly black architectural firms. We drew 13 lawyers on the side, people like George Barrett on the other side. And we had a temporary injunction here, and then the judge, Wiseman, allowed us to do brief depositions, 1 day of deposition. I did them. I had 13 experienced lawyers objecting to everything and all that. And in that process, Mr. Williams would occasionally say something like, "You're doing good." And so it's just in the hurly-burly of it, one in a jury trial, one in this thing, where I knew I was being an out-lawyer, but I managed to not lose the case in those depositions. And we ended up getting some kind of relief, but Judge Wiseman ultimately granted summary judgment against us, saying that the combination of the 3 minority firms into a group called Compact violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. It went up on appeal, and somehow we got it worked out on appeal. And I'm not sure of all it was. There was an NCAA case that had just come down from the United States Supreme Court. In some kind of way under that, he interpreted it that way. He gave us a fair shot to let us take all those depositions, trying to get the temporary injunction and all that. He disagreed. But in the course of that case, and one of those clients is still a good friend of mine now, it's just like, okay, maybe you're not just a briefcase carrier, which I would have been fine with. Behind the scenes works for me, but
So by the time you got to the AG's office, you now have your voice.
Yeah.
And you are really carrying a pretty heavy caseload. I know you had several important cases. You start off with Chris Modisher.
Right.
How long were you with Chris?
About 20 months.
And then what happened?
I went to the consumer protection because that 10-week trial, when all of my kids were a teenager and my son was he's the oldest, he was about 15, and he was kind of being a little unruly. He never got into any trouble, but I was gone too long.
He was a teen.
Yeah, he was a teenager. And so I said, I can't do this traveling for these long trials. I had to take the Memphis case, the one that ended up to be a 2-week trial with me. But I went on and applied, and I ended up in the consumer protection group. And one of the things, Deputy Cynthia Kinzer, a very smart lady, very wonderful person to work for. She was my deputy. Sent an email around and said, if you could just work on something, well, what would you work on? Well, my mother had started smoking cigarettes when she was 11 or 12, and that's what killed her when she was 51. So I said, I didn't know what the scope of our charge was. I said, can we do something about children smoking? I just said that. And I didn't know whether we could or not. And then the tobacco case came out, and I guess she knew that I had an interest in it.
Now, who was the Attorney General when you first started?
When I first started, Charles Burson.
And when you switched from Chris Modisher over to Cynthia?
Yes.
Was it still Burson?
It was still Burson.
Okay, so now you've told her that tobacco might be of interest to you. That's early on when you first went there, right? Under
Yes.
consumer litigation? How much longer was it before you started actually having cigarette litigation?
Well, in that period, in the first 18 months or so that I was in consumer, Knox Walkup became the Attorney General. And that's when the tobacco stuff started to heat up a little bit. And I applied, when Chris Marshall left, I applied for her old position, deputy, knowing that there were other people ahead of me. But I applied, and when Knox Walkup interviewed me, I said to him, look, I know there are other people ahead of me, and I may have mentioned the person's name who got the job, who I knew was next in line. And he, I said, she's more qualified than I am for this position, but I wanted you to know, as I knew Attorney General, that I'm ready to take on more responsibility. And that's all I said. The other person rightly got the promotion, who was a good friend of mine, and then later, he decided to create two positions that reported directly to him, Special Deputy for Litigation. He named me, so I was up above the position I had applied for. I didn't apply for this one. It didn't exist. And Linda Ross, a very brilliant, capable lawyer who's still there, I believe, to the other one. And she had certain strengths. We put together a litigation plan. What they were concerned about was getting surprised about an adverse ruling in a big case, and there not being any lead up, cross-divisional sharing of resources. When you got close to trial, you should have a plan to make sure you had the experts that you need, to make sure that you had the paralegals you needed and all that. And part of what we did is help shepherd the cases, and then we saw all the case dispositive motions and things like that. And it was when I was in that position that they gave me tobacco, and then I said, and so I started under Attorney General Knox Walkup, and then just about the time the settlement came out, the big settlement came out, General Paul Summers was named, and he was sued before he was sworn in. After he was announced, he was sued out in California in the case. So he tells the story. I'm the first person with the Attorney General's office he ever talked to. And I said, look, I've read the complaint. There's nothing to worry about. Our team is on it, because whenever we got a complaint pertaining to tobacco, and given that we were getting like $150 million a year on it, I didn't go to bed that night until I read it and analyzed and let the people in the executive suite know whether it was a risky proposition or not. If it was, then we could swarm it. We could bring in, really experienced lawyers to help us with it, because we had a very small team, just 2 lawyers on it. So I got to handle a lot of litigation involving that, people trying to intercept, is the word I used, the tobacco settlement funds for various theories. In federal court, in state court, even had a few over in East Tennessee.
Over what period of time did that occur?
The settlement was finalized in 1998. And one of the unusual things is there was a phase 2 settlement where we had to fly back and forth in these little planes with General Summers and I to North Carolina and meet to try to hammer out the settlement as to the tobacco farmers and quota holders in Tennessee so that they could transition to other things, because they would be affected because the price was going up, and so there would be less demand.
Now, this was a settlement with a number of attorney generals involved with the tobacco companies,
Yes.
right? So how did you meet with these other state attorney generals?
Primarily through conference calls. We did a lot of conference calls, and it was complicated.
It was Zoom before we had Zoom?
Yeah, we did a lot of conference calls. That was the big thing in the Attorney General's office in those days. Conference call for multi-state groups is what they called them. And almost all the big settlements and sometimes you had to litigate them, and sometimes you had to deal with an intervening federal agency like the FTC or something who wanted to go ahead of us, or the Department of Justice, and we spent time trying to get them not to go to court and not to mess up our settlements. And there were times when I first started in the Consumer Protection Division, I was cross-designated with Steve Hart as an assistant U.S. attorney over in Chattanooga to help with telemarketing cases. That a lot of cross-border, a lot of people in Canada, and so Steve Hart was a whiz at that. And I'm carrying briefcases again.
He's still there.
He's still there, and so we never, that initiative at some point fizzled out. Maybe there was a change in administration. I don't know what happened. But we did work up some cases that the U.S. Attorney's Office, ultimately in Atlanta, handled. And that was kind of interesting. It was horrific, the way they were treating elderly people and threatening them and things like that.
That's sad.
Yeah.
So you are in the Consumer Protection Consumer Division at the AG's office. You're doing tobacco litigation. You have these other cases. How long were you in the consumer area?
I was in consumer before I got promoted to special deputy.
Special deputy.
For
How long did
litigation.
you have that title?
See, I went to the executive suite. I was up there with the big shots like Patsy Cottrell and all that, and Andy Bennett. I was in high cotton, so to speak. I was there about 2 years, and then they decided to make the tobacco unit a division, and they put me over it, and we ended up with about 4 or 5 lawyers, and there's a lot to do. Just a lot of implementation and defending lawsuits.
Did you say that the settlement was $150 million for the state of Tennessee?
Per year, roughly, is what we get. It was estimated to be $4.8 billion through the year 2025, as long as the tobacco companies were in business. And so it's probably over $2 billion or over $3 billion.
And those funds are to be used how?
And to go straight into the state treasury.
I thought for some reason it was to help with health care costs.
We went. That was the premise of our claim if we had sued, but we settled before we had to independently. There were 4 states that Mississippi, Minnesota, Texas, and maybe Florida that sued first, and they got probably a little bit better settlement than the rest of us get. And so after that, the other 46 states came in with this master settlement agreement that we had. And then those were the main tobacco companies, and then some of the smaller tobacco companies could join, but there were some that never joined. And so we had the statutory process that we went through to make them escrow money, roughly equivalent to what they would pay, to supposedly under the theory of leveling the playing field. Did not let it be such a burden to the ones who join, and therefore give people an incentive to join if everything was level. And so there was a Tennessee Supreme Court case involving N.V. Sumatra on the personal jurisdiction involving the Indonesian. I worked on that case before it ever went to court, and
I learned a lot about how tobacco gets into the United States.
Yeah. And so we became experts on the Hague Convention. We could tell you if we had a Brazilian company and we wanted to serve a deposition notice, we figured out that if we went to the airport and tried to serve that person in Brazil, we would get arrested. We learned all that stuff, and every letter that went out, everybody in the division looked at it because we knew that it could be Exhibit A on the lawsuit that brought all the money down. After the money started to flow, and we went through a process called state-specific finality. There was a case, an application for cert pending in the United States Supreme Court J.D. Lee's law firm over in
East Tennessee.
Yeah, and that's how I met Justice Lee through that. We met
Sharon
over
Lee.
in Madisonville about something. She was awesome. I don't even remember what it got worked out, whatever it was with her. But the other cases, anyway, it went up and to the United Supreme Court. They ultimately denied cert, and we got state-specific finality when they denied cert, and we were able to get the money. Well, we thought it would be a good idea. General Summers thought it was a good idea. I mean, he wasn't gung-ho about it. He was such a savvy political person. He said it'd be a good idea to go tell the legislature what the CDC best practices says about how the money should be spent. That 10% should go into youth smoking cessation and such, and just tell them. And we brought up Mike Moore, the Attorney General from Mississippi, who was the lead person in those 4 states that settled, to him to come up and talk. And we told him, I said, don't argue with the legislature. Don't bam your fist. Just matter of factly tell them what the thing is, and they're going to do what they decide is the best thing to do for the policy. We just want to at least feel like that we did what we're supposed to do, and we had never, I don't think the office had ever gone to the legislature to suggest how they should spend any money, and it was a little scary.
A little delicate.
It was very delicate because we knew we didn't do policy. We knew it was their decision, and they didn't treat us too roughly. They listened. I remember Governor Wilder making a couple of remarks, and Governor Wilder and General Summers were close, same town and things like that. But General Summers knew how to handle it. I just went with him to watch him work,
And what was the outcome?
Put it in the general fund.
Oh.
And it's been in the general fund ever since, as far as I know. And so, and I don't know if it's 150 million per year as it was during the HIFA. It's probably less than that now.
You also, I think, had some participation in utility rate cases.
Yes.
And did you have participation in administrative hearings also?
Yes. In March of 2002, I believe, I was promoted to deputy over the Consumer Protection Division. And because they had switched me to tobacco, so I was just over tobacco. And they combined tobacco, consumer protection, which is basically preventing scams, and with consumer advocate, which is the public utilities. And at that time, the commission, it was a 3-person commission.
Was it the Public Service Commission at that time?
No, it
changed.
was the Tennessee Regulatory Authority.
Okay.
And Sarah Cowell, who I believe was the chairman at that time, and then within the first couple of years, Debbie Tate came over, and one of the things she really contributed that I saw, of course there were behind-the-scene contributions, I'm sure, but up front, she came up with an idea that was kind of novel in regulatory cases. Now, the regulatory cases that we dealt with were gas, telecommunications, and there were a few water companies around the state that were involved. And there was a potential for if there were any local electric companies. But most of our work was with these gas rate cases, gas utility rate cases. And so it was up or down. Either they were entitled to the rates they were, and so whenever we got a rate request from a company, say Piedmont or Atmos or whomever it was, they may be combined now, I don't know. But anyway, a gas case, we swarm on it because we had a short period of time to oppose it. And so we had an economist, We had 2 or 3 accountants, we had paralegals, we had a team of 3 or 4 good lawyers, and 2 of them at the beginning were CPAs also. So there's no way that I could, in a year or 2, learn public utility law, because it's not in case books, most of it.
No.
It's in the institutional knowledge. It's in old tariffs and things like that. And so what I did is I brought my trial litigation experience and my settlement experience too. And so when they prepared a response in a rate case, and we did it very quickly, there was a short turnaround, I would say, let me see it first, and let me add some trial advocacy stuff to it. I'm not going to mess with any of your conclusions. I don't know what the right rate of return should be, but let's make it persuasive if we can. And that was my contribution. I always said it, I got it out of the way. But one case, which was called a PBR, and then back in those days I knew what a PBR was. It involved one of the gas companies. It was Atmos. I actually tried it before the commission, and after I had left that position and went back to tobacco, they split tobacco back off. I went back over tobacco. I was over tobacco at the point when I became a judge. But at that point, I tried it and went back to tobacco. When the decision came out, we won that case that I tried. But Director Tate started pressing settlements, mediation, and negotiation, and it was really an up and down thing. They would ask us, is this right? And we'd say, well, no, it's not right. And then you fight it. And so there was no room, very little room to negotiate that. I think she was instrumental in starting that process where there was a more robust exploration of settlement. And I think that saved a lot of money. I think that turned out to be a good thing. And it made us talk to the other side more. And also, it put us in a position where we had more constructive interaction with the directors. And that was good. That was good, because sometimes when we, as the consumer advocate, file something, it looked like we were just fighting to be fighting. And that was not the case. But in this process, things became more collaborative. Well, that's the word I was looking for.
Well, you hinted just a moment ago that you were in the middle of trying this case, and then they took you back to tobacco just before you went on the bench. And I don't want to shortchange any of the work that you did in the Attorney General's office, but it sounds as though you had a number of rather significant cases that you were involved in, just as you did with Senator Williams. Are there any of those cases that come to your mind right now, other than the ones that you've talked about?
The tobacco cases, which were risky for us, some in federal court. We had one that went to a full-fledged decision in the Sixth Circuit, the Barden case. That's all I remember, the Barden case. Were significant cases in some of the time, and I had a case decided in 2000 by the Tennessee Supreme Court that I argued before the Tennessee Supreme Court, and we won that. It was a Brown and Williamson versus State of Tennessee, and one of the things that's cited for is the American rule. That was a case, and then we had cases which were virtually identical to those that we were able to get thrown out in summary judgment after having litigated those.
How was it that you actually came to be on the bench?
One day I was in the Attorney General Summers' office for business. 3 or 4 people in the office. We got through the business. He said, "Russell, will you stay behind for a minute?" And I had a great relationship with him. Come from altogether different backgrounds, but he just was a straight shooter. And so he said, "Have you ever thought about the judiciary?" And I said, "No." I said, "I can't run for anything." I just that I'm not wired that way to run for election. And I had ruled it out early once I found out what was correct. He said, "You might give it some thought. I think you'd be good for it." So I started thinking about it. And then at that time, there were some appellate court openings coming, and I started applying. I applied for the Tennessee Supreme Court. And a young man who was just a tiny bit more qualified, Justice Colt. I'm joking, everybody. Got that one, and then the Court of Appeals, applied, Andy Bennett got Judge Dinkins got it. And what was odd when I went up on the Judge Dinkins thing, they asked me, "Are you more qualified than Judge Dinkins on the Judicial Selection Commission?" And I said, "No, he's ahead of me," which was the truth. What am I do live? He was ahead of me. He had been a chancellor. He had mentored me. I had learned so much from him. I couldn't get in there behind closed doors, out of his sight, and play like I was more qualified for that. So I told him he's more qualified. It was a trick question because somebody else answered that question the wrong way. I found out later. But what has helped me in my career is realizing that, people like Judge Dinkins, Senator Williams, all 4 of the attorney generals I work with.
Who was the 4th one? Burson?
Cooper.
Cooper.
He was
Okay.
the AG when I left. All of them brave. All of them great at what they did. That I want to always be thankful and, not go get behind closed door and act like I did something on my own steam when I had to help. I'm more than most people because, being reserved and quiet and not having any kind of political resume or inclination. I needed people to help me, and I knew it. And so in that process, as it turned out, I had been over these 3 units, tobacco, consumer advocate, and consumer protection. Had about 25 people under me, people who knew me well. Then I went back to tobacco to a smaller division. Well, what I didn't see as I had to think about it, all these people that I supervised, and about 15 of them were lawyers, were now free to write letters on my behalf since I didn't supervise them anymore. So the pool of talent that knew me in my most recent work were able to write letters. So it all worked out in a way that made my application stronger because it happened midstream. After I got transferred,
Right.
I may have applied for 1 or 2. I ended up applying for at least 4 jobs that I didn't reach the top 3 on. And I told my wife, I said, "You know what? If I ever make the top 3, I got a feeling the governor's gonna pick me." And so the circuit court position and the Chancery Court position were open at the same time. And Judge Joe Binkley, our presiding judge, was appointed to the circuit court, and I was appointed to the Chancery Court position. And then one time I was, after having applied, made the top 3, I didn't go and interview in person. I think counsel for the governor interviewed me by phone for that position.
It was a
they-
brand-new position. There wasn't anybody in it, right?
It was, Judge Dinkins had vacated,
That's
Chancellor
right. He
Chancellor
had moved
Dinkins
up.
had vacated and gone up to the Court of Appeals. And so my secretary called me and said, Governor Bredesen is on the phone. I said, don't play. Because they were good with pranks and stuff. He said, no, for real. And so he said, are you still interested in the appointment? So I said, yes, sir. And he told me that he was happy to appoint me. And so
And once you were sworn in, what did you find out about being chancellor?
that it is that first of all, they handle more areas of the law than I thought. So it brought new meaning to the phrase, bringing fresh eyes. I didn't know we did prisoner cases. I didn't know about the different things, all the various boards and things that came to the Chancery Court. I had practiced extensively in federal court, which I think is similar to practicing in Chancery Court, and extensively in Chancery Court. And so I had an idea, but it was much more to it. We had a lot of big cases, and every now and then you get a high-profile case, maybe something that needs expedited attention, and
What were some of the surprises that you found once you got to the bench? You'd had a legal career of some notoriety, and not notoriety, but noteworthy. What did you find were the surprises in Chancery, besides the variety of
Right.
cases?
Well, this is not a big thing, but the first thing that came to my mind when you asked the question, the Chancery practice had changed from when I did a lot of Chancery Court in private practice in the 14 years I was in the AG's office, where I didn't do that much. I tried a case in front of Chancellor Loud. I handled an administrative appeal in front of you, but I handled a case in front of Chancellor Dinkins. But I didn't do that much in the Chancery Court. And one of the things I saw that had changed is, and I think we were in economic times because it was 2008 when I was appointed, that there were a surprising number of pro se litigants on big cases where there were maybe over $1 million at stake, and somebody's trying to represent themselves. It was a shock. It was a shock to my system because that never happened when I appeared in Chancery Court. So that was a small thing, but that was a shock. But what that meant was that I might have a 5-day jury trial with a pro se, and that was that was an adjustment. That was a challenge. It was nice to have a chance to be part of the judicial family. Again, I'm Russell, I'm quiet, whatever. I'm not the most gregarious person that ever lived, but I enjoyed that. I enjoyed you mentoring me. You've been officially my mentor and helping me in so many ways. And the other judges were helpful.
Did you find that viewing an administrative appeal, after having done administrative work, did you find a lot of comfort in being the person who gets to review what happened at the administrative level?
What was different for me is, I just used to try those cases. In the AG's office, I tried a case involving Tennessee State about a promoter and crowd size and how much was owed to the promoter for one of these football classic games, and nobody knew how many people were there. And that's what. and I tried it before the Claims Commission, and we won it, whatever. And so I had to, for the first time in my life, I did plenty of appellate work, but for the first time I really had to think like an appellate judge, and that was new to me. I thought it was. I looked at it, and I said, "You mean I have to make findings of fact? I can't just say up and down." I'm sure I knew that, but so it was a different thing to think like an appellate judge.
I think being a chancellor, you're required to be a trial judge where you actually conduct a hearing and listen to witnesses. And then you have a second job of being an appellate judge on these administrative appeals. And it's a dichotomy as far as what you're required to do.
Yes, it was a little different. It was an adjustment. There were plenty of adjustments for me. The first day I was there, I got one of these little kind of like a telephone notice from my judicial assistant, Barbara Bell, who still works there, who's been tremendous. And she had given me a paper message. Somebody had called me to congratulate me, my first day at work. And it said, C. Perkins. And I'm thinking, look, my name is Russell. I need to go out and get her straight. My name is not to say, oh, C. Chancellor. It took me a while to figure out the new, the courthouse has undergone some changes because they had been in Metro Center, and I had never parked at the courthouse. I had walked. All of my jobs were walking this. And so it took me about a week to figure out the tunnels and all. Nobody showed it to me.
No.
So, and I said, I know the security guards are laughing. He's supposed to be a judge. He can't find his way to his office.
So has the work changed since you went on the bench? You went on the bench in 2008.
There have been some changes, but not really. The bar has changed.
In what way?
It mirrors society. It's less civil. Most good lawyers work together on logistical and scheduling things. That's still the case. But it's some things that just like, we didn't do it that way back then. We didn't make those kind of allegations against counsel so quickly, opposing counsel so quickly. And we didn't seek sanctions every time we filed a discovery motion, So it's a little rougher. It's a little less civil than it was back, and part of it has to do with familiarity. We saw each other in the courthouse more. I don't know if it had to do with the configuration of the courthouse, because at one time the courthouse, there was the criminal courts, there was general sessions court, circuit, and Chancery all in one building, and so motion day was like a reunion. You got to see everybody. Or maybe it's part of the larger problem we see in society, that people are more likely to think that if they don't get everything that they wanted or asked for, that there's something afoot, or more appeals are being taken, more appeals are being reversed than it was back in our day. We had to argue cats and dogs to get the Solicitor General to allow us to appeal something back, and sometimes, at least half of the time, the answer was no, don't appeal it. Well, it's more appeals, more reversals, and I'm not saying I don't have any opinion about the merits of it, because I always get treated fairly by the Court of Appeals. But even when I was in Ohio and appealing or dealing with a few appeals during that 1 year I was up there, it was hard to get a trial judge reversed. Now when I look at the reports, it looks like it's about 50%. Well, that wasn't how it was back then. And I'm just looking at the Court of Appeals. I don't look at the Court of Criminal. But half, it seems like you go through the reports and you say Davidson County, and you see it, and it seems like half of them are reversed. Then they go through periods of time when it's...
How important it is to you to make the right decision?
It's important. You live and you learn. You realize that when a question of law goes to the Court of Appeal, it's de novo. And if you had 5 lawyers at lunch, they're going to disagree. So it's the same concept.
How has the career choice that you made impacted your family?
Well, because it was so tough, I worked so many hours and didn't make a great deal of money in private practice. It probably affected my family in a couple of ways. One, they saw that I worked hard, but when they had a game, when they had a recital, I was there. Somehow, even to the point of asking the Attorney General of Tennessee, can I go to my daughter's softball game? It starts at 3:30, you know. And they would let me do it because they knew I would work in the evening and do what needed to be done. The second thing, I think it may have convinced my 4 children not to go into law. None of them have, and all would be brilliant at it, but they have not.
Well, one thing I have met is your wife, and she's just a wonderful person.
Thank you.
And I have noticed as you've been talking, you said, and then we went to Nashville, and
Right.
we went to the Attorney General's office, and it sounds as though you don't make those decisions by yourself.
Of course not. We work together, we talk about things, and she often has a vantage point that I don't have.
And what does she do?
She is a elementary school principal here in public schools here in Nashville.
And you're saying that her vantage point is helpful?
It's crucial. It's important. It's because she knows me, she knows our family, and for example, I wouldn't be a judge without her. She came to all the hearings. When I was running for election, people wanted to vote for her. I said, well, she's not a lawyer. You can't vote for her. They wanted to vote for her. Who's she? I want to vote for her.
Now, let me ask you, how many times have you run for office?
In 2008, I had to run for the unexpired term. And
Did you have an opponent?
yes, because it was too late how the appointment failed to have a primary. So I went to the caucus. People walked to one side of the room or the other. And so, lucky enough to prevail, the person who I got more votes than in that caucus meeting was running as an independent. And at that time, that was permitted. And then a few weeks in, he withdrew. And so I had an opponent through the caucus, and for a few weeks after that. And then in 2014, I had an opponent in the general election.
Okay. One of the things that I wanted to be sure to mention, we talked a little earlier before we agreed to set this up, and you said you have 3 great loves. I want you to tell a little bit about your 3 great loves and how that's been impacted by your career.
Well, my 3 great loves are my wife and family, my love for teaching and being a minister, as a man of God and my love for baseball.
And I sort of want to go back to this love of baseball because somewhere I know that you have never stopped being a Giants fan, San Francisco Giants fan. How have you kept your interest in baseball while you're working as hard as you are, raising your children, focusing on family and faith? There's a focus on baseball, too.
Yeah, I just love it, and so much of my connections with my dad and my family, my big brother and my sisters, is connected to the baseball thing. Because if the parents were not there, we'd find a way to play baseball in the house. Even if we use like a plastic ball, or we even get adept at using paper, wadded up paper as balls, so we wouldn't get in trouble. But yeah.
Do your children play?
I slept with my glove.
I heard that. And your wife knows that. Hopefully it's not under the bed anymore.
No.
But do your children play?
My son and my daughters all played. I coached them all. My son played baseball. My daughters played softball.
Are you coaching now?
No.
Any chance you might?
I would love to be an assistant coach, maybe the third or fourth person down the road, for some 9, 10-year-old kids or something like that. That's
Maybe
the
even start
ideal age.
reporting on your grandchildren's baseball games.
Yeah, I have been to a few softball games.
Now, are there any activities that you're involved in with the bar, with other organizations that I haven't touched on?
Most of my activities involve family, church, men's groups.
What type of men's groups are you with?
I am in, our church has a group called Band of Brothers that I started in 2011. And men from different churches come together, and we have fellowship, a meal, an abbreviated Bible study, prayer time together. And
Do you mentor young people?
sometimes, an aspiring lawyer who I may know their parents or something will have me serve as a mentor.
And are you working on any projects right now, independent of the incredible caseload that you have?
One of my great loves that I mentioned of the three, but the subset of that is being a teacher of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I started off as a Sunday school teacher while I was in law school. They just asked me to teach the 5th and 6th graders. I've spoken at several times at schools, sometimes at my wife's schools, sometimes at other schools. But I love the idea of pouring into young people. One of the things I want to do, if I ever can find time to do it, and maybe probably the best way I could do it is maybe as a guest lecturer or something at a high school, and talk about civics and talk about how the system really works, and how the constitutional framework works, and so that people will have an understanding. I think a lot of people just don't know basic civics, how things are structured, what their rights are, how important it is to vote, that kind of thing.
That's pretty important. And I do think you've touched on something that is a current issue today about voting. What do you think can be done to remedy the lack of knowledge of history and civics? You took to reading early about everything.
I think having a more robust civic and dispute resolution curriculum in junior high and high school is important. So kids won't think, well, I got to get in a fight, or I got to shoot somebody, I got to threaten somebody, I got to bully somebody. I mean, that stuff happened, but it was a whole lot less prevalent. And, there was a culture set up that said, you don't do that. And I think trying to make a dent in it, trying to help a little bit is important. And sometimes people don't know where they came from. They don't know the power of the creeds that we have in this country. And it's the power of the creeds that lead to all the civil rights movement, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the things that bring about change that promote, access, equality. If you got an opportunity, but you don't really know how to access it,
It's not an opportunity.
it's not
then.
an opportunity for you. Or if you don't have anybody trying to open doors for you. I always had people trying to help me, and to this day, I don't know why. I don't know why Dean Jack Henderson at Ohio State took a shine to me. I don't know why. I have a son that has charisma like my wife. He can go somewhere, but I have always been in a different mode. I'm not wired that way. But somehow in my life, Mrs. Williams, taking to me like she did, that was important. That opened the door for us to come back home. And that was important because we didn't know it then, but my mother only lived 2 years more than that.
Mm.
So when she got sick, I got to go see her every day. And my older kids got to see me go see her every day. That showed them some things about continuity and the things that really matter.
And importance of family.
Yeah. And so one thing leads to another, and so sometimes a small thing like Julian Blackshear taking 60 seconds to write a little note on my C. And he didn't give me a C. I earned that C. On my C paper, it started me in a trajectory of the law. And, I began to, social studies was an easy course, it wasn't as hard as the chemistry and the biology and things like that. And so, I always did well in it, but I had no passion for it, really. And then that stirred kind of a passion, just to that, okay, how does this all work? And so.
The next 10 years, you're coming up for election again next year, right?
Yes.
Where do you see yourself over the next 10 years?
I don't know how it's going to happen, but I see myself, maybe it's through better management or whatever, spending more time with my grandkids. I have to do that. Because, see, they need the grandfather experience. I didn't have that growing up because my granddads lived in other cities. When I graduated from high school, my dad's dad in Pittsburgh, sent a wonderful card. It had Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, on it. And in it was a $50 bill. I'd never seen a $50 bill before. And then he wrote, "We are so proud of you, Rufus." I was not offended. He took the time to do that. I was thrilled. I spent the $50. But I don't want to misstate any of my grandchildren's name. I want them to know about me. I want to be able to answer and talk about the world I grew up in, which is a different world than what they're going to grow up in. And they need that kind of perspective deepens who people are and makes them less likely to go through life angry, go through life pointing the finger at other people. It gives them a perspective, a well-roundedness, I think, that is very important.
What advice would you give to young lawyers today?
It's a good cliche, but the practice of law is an honorable profession. It is a license. It is a privilege. It's powerful. You can stand between somebody and something undesirable. You can take a person who comes into your office shaking like a leaf over something, and you can give them the comfort that they're going to get adequate, competent, honorable representation, that they're going to get a chance at the justice that they want, and that the best lawyers, when they get an adverse decision from the judge, if they're angry, they don't show it. They just go and try to get them reversed.
Have I neglected any questions that you feel should have been asked?
No.
And do you think I've covered your history up to now fairly well?
Yes.
Okay. And what, if any, questions would you ask if you were on my side of the table? What would you ask yourself?
If you were to do it all over again as a chancellor and balancing the quality of life and all the issues that you confronted,
And what's the answer to that?
what would you do differently?
What would you do differently?
That was sneaky what you did. I try to be more balanced in my work life thing. It gets out of whack sometimes, and if you try to plan a little better, you can minimize the times when it gets out of whack. Sometimes something big comes in that requires expedited attention, and that can't be helped. But in the day-to-day, week by week, there are ways to do it. I read somewhere that one of the Supreme Court justices used to leave work at 3 or 4 o'clock every afternoon. But the way he organized his work, he would come in at a certain time and leave us. And so sometimes, having a more systematic approach to life will help you. Getting a big picture of what you're confronted with instead of dealing with just the pieces, just dealing with what's on your desk, but being able to stand back. Because see, when time goes by, when time goes by and you look back, you have the vantage point that you should try to develop while you're in the fray. And that's hard. But and I have learned, but I didn't know that when I walked in the door as a chancellor. So.
Well, Chancellor Perkins, I want to thank you, and we will adjourn.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.